This is a generation that wants to change the world.
Those folks that haven't had that happen, they sit on this decision piece, they get on a plateau, and they just go through life.
Developing a certain kind of man, rooted, strengthened, established.
And let's let that win and say, is this impacting this? If it is, and if it's not pushing it towards, then we need to let it go.
That kind of man changes a city.
You can start to see those patterns, those trends, and then you can adapt your communication style and approach.
Scott, one thing you really need to know is you think, well, I need to get in there and lead. That's an important L, but there were three that were more important, and it was just little.
Hey everybody, Preston Poore. Hope you're doing well today. Thanks for being part of P Cubed today. I'm excited to have my friend and guest, Scott Caldwell, here today, and I'll introduce him in just a second and give him a chance to tell us a little bit about himself. But I thought today's podcast was important because we're going to hit on a few things. Number one, how do leaders reshape mission and vision while honoring a legacy? How do they ensure alignment with personal and organizational values? And then how do they rally a team around a compelling new direction? Here's why this is so important. So many times when I was in my career, even at the Coca-Cola company, at Hershey or wherever it was, there was always new leadership that came in, new management, always a new philosophy, a new culture, a new way of looking at things. Question is, how soon did they make changes? Were they coming in just to be disruptive? And then how those changes took place over time. And it was funny, at Coke, I found a cycle of just every 2 years, you were impacted and affected by that and the way that whole thing rolled out. So I want to talk about that today because I think it's so important that if you're going to be an emerging leader and you're trying to accelerate into leadership, some of these things that Scott and I are going to talk about today, probably you haven't even thought of yet. Or maybe you've experienced them and you've walked through them and done really well, or you've walked through them and they've been a challenge for you. So all we really want to do is try to attempt to impart some wisdom to everybody today. And not that I have much, but we're going to lean on Scott for that, certainly. Because I always tell people, if I'm the smartest person in the room, guess what? We are all in trouble, right? So good stuff. So Scott, thanks for being here. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, before I introduce you, let me say this. Scott and I've gotten to be friends over the past year. And Scott is the president and CEO of, it's called CLC. It's Christ-Led Communities. He's formerly known as Christian Leadership Concepts. I took the program, a 2-week program, accelerated discipleship program, if you will, over those 2 years. I took it back in the late 2000s, 2008 through 11 or something. And it was transformational for me. It wasn't just the content, it was the relationships, the methodology, the way that we went through it. And it stuck so much so that I decided to raise my hand a couple years after that and said I wanted to facilitate a group and walk through life with them for a couple of years. And the amazing thing, Scott, is that our group, while we are not as frequent at it, we still meet for Friday mornings and know each other's lives and what's going on. And it's a really important touch point for all of that. So I'll weave a little bit of my journey in CLC into our conversation today, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here today and being part of our conversation.
Thrilled to be here. Honored to be with you and be on the P Cubed podcast.
Very nice. You said it right, so that's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Mostly what I'm excited about is a lot of the things that we'll talk about are things that you and I've discussed offline when there was no camera, no microphone, and you've been a friend but also a guide to walk alongside me on this journey of coming into a new, long-established organization that needed clarification of mission and vision, values, and just direction. And so a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about is stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, we really literally hashed it out over the phone, over coffee, breakfast, did a retreat, all that kind of stuff. So that's great. But take me back. I know that you were intimately involved with Young Life for a long time. I know that your story, you wanted to be a doctor originally, right? Yeah. And God didn't call you down that path necessarily. And I know how you talk about that. But tell the listeners today just a little bit about your journey, about how you started and then how you got to where you are today.
Growing up in South Carolina, thought I was going to be a pediatrician. I really think what I meant was I thought I would be rich and I could help people. And in my mind as a middle school kid, all doctors made the same salary, which was just a lot. Went to the University of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Go Vols.
Thank you. And midway through my junior year, I tell people it's like I had been carrying around a cup that was full of doctor And suddenly there was a hole punched in the bottom of my cup and doctor drained out. And then I kind of prayerfully was like, what will you fill this cup with? And prior to coming to the University of Tennessee, I had 1 year of experience with this organization called Young Life. I had a great time and had been volunteering with them in college at the University of Tennessee. And it was with this empty cup walking around that God began to fill it with just the idea, this large amorphous ministry. I don't know if you ever think about it, but ministry could look a lot of ways. It could look like feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, and or an evangelist or a pastor, shepherd, leader, teacher. I didn't have a clue. Mm-hmm. And so I was ending my time in college with this question, okay, if ministry is the answer, what kind? And so went to seminary for a couple of years, and after that, the answer was really clear. It was Young Life, and that was 26 years ago, so 1998. And then in July of this past year, came to work with CLC full-time.
Really good. And you're called into that, and we're excited to have you be part of it. I love this. It's kind of off script, but tell me about how, because you told me a little bit about how you and Susan, your bride, met. And then I think a conversation that you had with her dad about all that. Would you be willing to share that real quick because I think that impacted your relationship with her, the way you were looking at life, marriage, those types of things.
Susan, my wife, we've been married for 28 years, and you're supposed to go ask the lady's father for his permission, and that's usually like a private conversation between you and the dad. And instead, we were all at dinner. I was myself, Susan, her dad, and his wife, and I just asked right there. And he made the most wonderful pledge, I guess. Yes, you can marry my daughter on one condition, that you come work with me and we'll make millions. And so there's that dollar sign flashing at me again. And somehow I think I had already felt the emptiness of that cup and then the fullness of what maybe ministry might hold. And for the first time in my life, said out loud, I think I have a better offer. And I thought, oh no, now I've lost the job and the girl. And he said, I think you're right. I just wanted my little girl to be taken care of. And so that was a pivotal moment, because it meant turning my back on some things that I had a pretty strong appetite for, and instead saying, no, my deepest appetite is for what the Lord has for me. And it was in ministry.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that story. That just always stuck with me about how the father-in-law made that offer, but it really stirred in you about a crisis of belief, that moment when you had to make a decision. So I thought that's so good. Well, let's turn now then to CLC. What led you to CLC? Remind me, you were part of the CLC program in East Tennessee before all this took place, right? So tell me a little bit about how you got involved in that, and then the impact it had on you personally. And then let's go into maybe how you got involved with it from an organizational perspective.
Yeah, I was working with Young Life in East Tennessee, a little town called Johnson City, and was leading a great number of college-age men, young men, who were going to become our volunteer Young Life leaders and kind of share their faith. But there was nobody to really mentor or disciple them. And I began, as their numbers grew, the need to have this kind of guy that would pour into them grew. I could only do so much. And I began to ask around, who do we know that could do that? And there were very few. And the more we prayed, we thought maybe we should invest in developing that kind of man who could then develop these kinds of young men. So I called around all my ministry friends in the Southeast and said, who does a better job of helping equip men for that kind of role? And everybody kept saying these same three letters, CLC. And I thought, well, I got to check it out. And I called up their national office, and they helped me get trained and the information necessary to put a group together. And it was great. It began with just praying for, God, who do you want in this group? Over a course of about 6 months, the group formed. One guy I had to go back to and ask him to reconsider. And that was actually a pivotal conversation for him, because he wasn't the kind of guy who you asked to reconsider.
Okay.
And instead, he stepped in and may have been as valuable an experience for him as anybody. that group met every week for 2 years. And I don't know who you spend 2 years with other than your spouse or maybe at your workplace, but a lot can happen in 2 years. There were babies born, parents lost, dreams achieved, dreams shattered. And to be able to walk through that with, for me, 11 other guys showed me how much community was important, how much I had to learn. And then I was leading the group. So a lot of times when you're the teacher, you end up learning more than anybody else. And so I experienced the value of memorizing scripture or being able to, I'd already known how to study the Bible and teach it, but now I was teaching people how to teach it. And so it was really rewarding. But most of all, I remember the guys, I remember God and the things that we discovered together about him. I remember praying for the next group to start. I also remember thinking, there's nothing in town like this. And I was really excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, such a unique opportunity. But why is discipleship important?
Well, number one, it's the Great Commission.
Sure.
Is all authority has been given to me, Jesus says in Matthew 28. Now go and make disciples, or as you are going, make disciples. It seemed to be that the Savior of the world had something in mind for us in the idea of making disciples. And it's easy to let a lot of other things about our faith take over the good things like the community or small groups or gathered worship. I mean, very beautiful things, Bible reading, prayer. But it's interesting, he didn't say, all authority has been given to me, go and make small groups. He said, go and make disciples. And that would be how we replicate his presence in the world and bring his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. So that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, no, good. So good. So you've heard me say this before, and I know I love how you've questioned so I'm going to play with this for just a second. But I've read Barna's information, and here's the net. And so if you're not a believer, please keep listening. You might learn something. And if you are, then please listen. I think this is really important information for you to hear. But here's an interesting piece on this, is that Barna says that I think only 2 out of 5 believers have actually been discipled. And how do you define that? Well, that means a mature believer. So somebody kind of knows what they're doing, knows the ropes, knows how and teaches somebody how to pray, how to read the Bible, how to share their faith, and the importance of being part of a church community, right? Pretty simple foundation. I think everybody agree on those. Those are the foundational things. Now, I did my own survey called Poorna, Poorna survey, right? Kind of like Barna, so that's how the little playoff on that. And I would say it's less than that. I really would. Everybody I asked, that number is less. So if you're sitting in a room of 100 people that are in church, you can bet bottom dollar that probably, if I do my math right on this, 2 and 5 would be 20 people.
20 out of 100.
Out of 100. Where's that 40? I don't know. It's 40, whatever the number might be. I'm not a mathematician. That's the good thing that's here, right? See, I'm getting you to laugh, Scott. So smile. It's good. It's all okay.
You're a lot of things.
But whatever, that's right. Whatever the number is, but 1 and 5, so that would be 20%, right? 2 and 5 would be 40%. Either way you look at the number, it's not the majority. And so the challenge is that those folks that haven't had that happen, they sit on this decision piece, they get on a plateau, and they just go through life. And they go through the motions of life. And another statistic, I don't know if I shared this with you or not, but I learned this a couple months ago when I was at the New Canaan Society. They had one of the speakers up there, and he talked about founding the Abide organization. And it was Dr. Henry Cloud and Henry Blackerby of Experiencing God. They commissioned a study with David Barna, and they found that only 1% of people abided. It's that same thing, same idea, that they prayed, that they meditated on God's word, all those things. And the question is, it's not those habits. Those habits lead to something. They lead to a personal relationship, right, with our Lord. And so that's why it's so important. It's not just because I want to teach you how to read the Bible for that sake. It's because of what the result of that is. And I think that's so important. So that's why we've been given this Great Commission, is to help people abide, get into that fellowship, into that relationship, and intimately on that. And so now you have gone through CLC at Johnson City, and you've enlisted those in there, and then all of a sudden the phone rings one day, and I imagine CLC. Something happened there. Tell me about how that happened and how you got involved from an organization perspective.
I had this wonderful experience with CLC. I would have recommended it to anyone. In fact, we've learned that 95% of men that go through it say, I would recommend this to a friend. And I was one of those recommending it to a friend. I was doing it. I'd done that for 10 or 15 years. I carried on vocationally through young life into what I thought was a road that would just continue going. And it was about 18 months ago, 18 months before I began with CLC, that I began to get a sense that this road did not keep going forever. And nothing had happened to end that road. I just thought, this is no longer my road. Began to pray about what would be the new adventure. And I was in a coaching conversation where I was asking my coach, he said, what do you want to talk about today? And I said, if it would be possible to leave this conversation, I don't need to know what I'm going to do, but if I knew like the shape of what I was going to do, like if a puzzle piece has like certain indentations and little knobs, that I could pray about this piece. And then when I saw something that fit it, and it would be a match. And it was a really great coaching conversation because I left with that shape in mind and prayed it every day. And then about 4 weeks later, I got a phone call. Hey, I'm going to send you something. Do you know anybody that would be interested in this? And
I love that conversation. Yeah. They're fishing for you, right?
Yeah.
Often.
What a great way to introduce that.
Do you know anybody?
Yeah, like maybe you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was my response when I said, yeah, me. That's the shape that I'd been praying for. And the shape specifically it had something to do with leading at least a team, a mission. And people would say, you mean a ministry? And it's like, well, I know a lot of ministries that aren't necessarily on a mission, but a mission to achieve something, to grow, to transform, some sort of outcome that we could achieve together. And that, along with knowing that it was making a difference in God's kingdom, was wonderful. Then the thing was something I'd had experience with, was too hard to pass up. So I said, yeah, I know somebody, me. Right.
You raise your hand. And so you go through all the due diligence, talk to everybody, and you come on board. Tell me about the first 90 days. I see a lot of leaders come on to organizations. Some sit back and kind of soak everything in. Others are change catalysts right away and say, hey, this is wrong. We got to do this. We got to do this right. This is the way I want to do things. What was your approach on that first part to try to understand the organization? Because the way CLC is that it has a board and it has a team, staff, as you call it, and then you have facilitators, and then the folks that are actually participating in the programs, right? So tell me about how you started to think through that, navigate all of that, because I imagine that an organization that's been around for 40 plus years, right? There's a lot of great things that are going on, but also there's some opportunities, as any leader would see when they come in. So tell us a little bit about your thought process on that.
I think for me, starting in any new role, 3 things that were important, especially when it's a leadership role, is you think, well, I need to get in there and lead. And that's an important L, but there were 3 that were more important starting out, and maybe even today. And it was just listening, learning, and trying to just love the people that God put on our team. And so that's really what I spent the first 90 days doing. There's a book that's really popular. It's a really helpful book, The First 90 Days. While there are some good tactical things in there, spending time listening, getting to know people, building early trust was huge. In terms of listening, 2 questions I asked every person. One was, what do you love about this job? Marcus Buckingham has a book called Love and Work, where he says, 2 people might be the general manager of a hotel, but they are loving 2 different things about the work. So I wanted to hear what each individual loved about this. And then the second question is, fill in the blank. Scott, one thing you really need to know is. And that was where things got a little so I kind of had some subjective, their own way they approach their job, and then also kind of like a what's behind closed doors that you think I need to be aware of. So I didn't come in completely ignorant. the more I had those questions and listened, I began to hear, I think I need to ask some other questions just to see where we are. So what's our mission statement? Like, what's our mission? The more I heard those answers, the more I understood that maybe it wasn't clear. The mission statement we inherited was kind of lengthy and had a lot of words, a lot of, like even had some like conditional clauses. And so it just wasn't crystal clear. We have 5 core values. Could you name one? And it's not a comment on whether or not they were good values. They were just lengthy again. Yeah. And so, and then how do we do what we do? And so wherever I heard on questions like that, agreement, I made note of it. And wherever I heard variance, I made note of that as well. And it kind of showed me what was needed that maybe the first 90 days book didn't cover. As helpful as I found that book, I found that my first 90 days looked a little different.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a good framework. I've used it in the past before. I think the thing that we all need to realize is that the things that you uncovered and had those questions, the approach number one is not common. So hats off to you to go in and to listen, to learn, and to love on others people. Those 3 L's ultimately lead to leadership, right? And so it's the kind of the reverse engineering and how you get to something, right, on that. But it's interesting at Coke. I remember when James Quincy came in, he's the current CEO, and they basically condensed the purpose or vision statement. And you've heard me say this before. I couldn't even try to repeat the original vision statement, but it was up on a wall, and Roberto Goizueta, I think, had said something at one time, and there was a quote. He's a former CEO. But what they did is they took that and they condensed it into something really simple. And it said to refresh the world and make a positive difference. I can repeat that. That's easy, right? That's written on my heart and mind. The other part on that is that I could see myself fitting into that. I want to be part of something bigger than myself, right? Refreshing the world. That sounds pretty aspirational, right? And then do something with the positive impact and influence is so just makes my heart sing as you do those things. So even though it was just selling brown sugar water, I could see the influence that we had. But the reason I say that is because if you go I'm sure, across the United States, around the world, and you talk to different companies where the cultures aren't great, most people can't tell you what the organization's vision is. They can't tell you what the mission statement is. They can't tell you how they fit in. And they certainly can't articulate the values, right? So it's I want to encourage you that an organization that has struggled a little bit, if those things aren't written on their hearts and minds, I think that's average, common, if you will. And so the job of a leader is to do exactly what you've done, is to go understand and then say, okay, let's start defining that, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you then, when you recognize from a cultural perspective that there are some opportunities to define, level set, re-energize, re-engage, how do you do that?
I think you have to know first it needs doing. And that's asking good questions. I asked 4 of our most tenured staff, team members, for their elevator speech. Mm-hmm. And there was some overlap, but not much. And so you just began to get the sense that there is something cohesive that needs to be formed. And we started with core values. I mentioned that they were longer. I'm really pleased we did this from a historical standpoint. We didn't come in and introduce new ones. Mm-hmm. We just said, here's 18 words. What are 2 words that we could label this with? Yeah. And we did that with each one. Did end up changing one of the later ones because it kind of conflicted with some of the other things that were going on. But now I was just in Atlanta last week and heard one of our local directors say at a gathering our core values. And he said them in a social conversation to a guy, and I literally watched the guy move forward. And then he said, ooh, I really like those. And it's kind of like you said about at Coke. It's not just that it was clear what you were supposed to do there, but something about it drew you in, and it had this attractive, like-minded sense about it. We had a CLC National Day of Prayer back in January, mm-hmm. and we used one of our core values. We said, we pray that we would be Christ-compelled. Mm. The response we got was tremendous just on those 2 words. Mm-hmm. That was the first value, mm-hmm. just labeled in 2 words.
Yeah, right.
Getting a common language getting in touch with those values, which is really an organization's identity, how they'll make decisions, how they'll hire, has been really a great way to start. And then from there, we've moved into, so what is our mission? What is our vision? Where are we going? What will be required? So
let's have some fun with this real quick. So we go up on a mountain, right? Four guys go up in a mountain and expect to come down with something. So Scott, you and I and a couple other guys from the CLC ecosystem, let's put it that way, went up and we said, okay, we want to come back down the mountain with a mission, vision, clarity on some other things. I guess from your perspective, was that time well spent? I'm not looking for you to pat anybody on the back on this at all. But there was some intentionality to get away, to think differently, to pray, and just say, and it was okay not to walk. Here's the net of the story. We walked away with some feelings and some thoughts, but we didn't walk away with clarity, right? And I think that might have came later, but that might have come later, if you will. But tell me a little bit about that process, because you're probably going up there. We have expectations. We meander through a conversation, then we walk away, right? So what was good in all of that?
I think like a lot of initiatives, my eyes are bigger than my stomach. I mean, I thought, oh, wow, we'll come back and this will all be buttoned up and crystal clear. That was true in some cases. We came back with a probably 90% accurate mission statement, at least something that for a little while I kind of called it our working mission statement, meaning we can go a long ways with that. It's accurate. It may lack some precision. We could fine tune it later, but we can really do some stuff with that. Sure. Second, just doing a good job of understanding some of our audience, who are the kind of the avatars that we need to be preparing different opportunities to touch them, to reach them, to nurture them. That was really helpful. And then to bring an idea of, here might be a vision statement, and to be up on a mountain, there's, we're like not wearing suits or we're not tucked in, and somebody can just say, that doesn't inspire me.
Well, that was me. That's
okay, yeah. I did. I said,
this stinks. Let's try it. Let's try something
two or
else.
three options, and it was good because in that casual setting, up on a mountain, looking out at beauty, you just want a version organizationally of what you're seeing out the door, out the window. And that's something I feel like we were able to weed through some things that were less than inspiring and begin to touch on some, this great horizon or this mountaintop, this sunrise of a statement that might really move the soul. And to even press pause and say, we don't have it yet, but that's okay. We know that we're generally aiming west, and now it's just a matter of, is it northwest, northwest, and that was one of the things and then the relational time together.
Well, I think it's important for folks, if you're thinking about creating vision, mission, those different things that we're talking about right now, to have a pretty tight group of people get together. And what helped us, I think, is the level of trust and relationship in the room, and that we could speak our minds. There was no politics behind it. You treated us all as equals, and we all treated that way as well, right? So it wasn't here, I've got a vision, I need you guys to align to it. It was like, how do we think through this together, right? And setting the stage and the fertile soil for that. And I think that's why we've landed, I don't know if we've all the way landed, but we've gotten to a very good spot. I want to shift the gears a little bit here, and I want to ask a question right off of this. And it says, many millennials want their work to align with their personal values. What advice do you have for leaders trying to balance their personal sense of mission with the broader direction of an organization? What would you how would you answer that question?
This is an area where it's really my past that's really equipped me. I've just worked with a lot of millennials and had to figure out where their genius lies. There's a story about a college professor, and a young lady in the class raises her hand and said, is there any way I can do this, get this to you at another time? The nonprofit that I started has a meeting when this project is due. And the professor sarcastically said, oh yeah, anybody else starting a nonprofit out there? And half the room, their hands go up. This is a generation that wants to change the world. And I'm in a role that I want to see the world changed as well. So we should have a lot of commonality in what we're trying to accomplish. But to your point, there's what I personally want to accomplish maybe, and then there's what the organization needs from me. So how do those two things dovetail? First, I kind of view one of the roles of a leader is to lift the lid off of the people that are on the team. And so to really get in tight and begin to say, I see great potential. I see the genius. I want to draw it out more. I think everybody shows up to work or in whatever field, and you're aware of where your lid is. You want to pretend it's not there, but it's there. When you can get in enough trust and have somebody say, let's take that lid off and let's really, but that involves some things. It involves talking about some things that maybe you want to pretend aren't there. So trust, believing in a person's ability, and then not just believing in it, but then empowering them to use it and setting them free. That was huge for me in terms of working with millennials, and then giving them training, working with them on understanding their strengths, other assessments, giving them coaching, whether it's in the organization or outside. Those two things for me have always resulted in that the question you're asking, where does my personal mission fit the organization's vision? When I've led that way, that question has kind of disappeared. And this is instead a place where I feel so valued, so a part of this team, that this is the vision. This is the mission I want to achieve. I think coming in, they may be a little bit askew, and then with good leadership, they kind of end up overlapping and accomplishing great things together.
You can, and the other side of that is when you have that overlap, and then over time, people change, organizations change. And so if your values are not congruent and you're not feeling like that your personal mission and the organization's mission is a fit anymore, that's maybe when it's time to look for something else, right? Otherwise, you're always going to be up against this tension and what to do. So certainly important for them to think about, us to think about as well. Let's have some fun with this, because I love this, as you brought this to my attention, this 6 types of working genius, right? And I'd love to know how you use that, how you see that, how is it helping you in the organization? And then I've got some thoughts on it because there's so many other, right? I was looking through to be truthful with you, I looked back at my Chat GPT and I said, okay, let's see how smart Chat GPT is. And I took my strength finders, my Myers-Briggs, my Herman brain dominance, this working genius, and I think there was one other that I threw all my documents in there. And interestingly enough, it was pretty consistent. But there's so many personality type tests, right, that are out there. And the interesting thing is to be able to do that. I would recommend anybody, if you have all that combined, or if you're old like I am, you might. But if you have a couple of them, throw them in there and say, okay, what are your insights? And it will tell you, right? And then the other thing I thought that was fun was I gave it yours. And I said, okay, tell me how it's best for Scott and I to complement each other. And it gave us some suggestions about how to do that. So that means that I just think things and you do all the work, right? That's right, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, anyway, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the 6 working genius.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with it, Patrick Lencioni, great author, runs the Table Group, and maybe most famous for 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and some other literary works, developed this assessment, the working genius, the 6 types of working genius. The idea is that we all have 2 geniuses, 2 competencies, and 2 frustrations. And it's a lot of other assessments. Which one of those gives you energy? And so I had become kind of interested in that, and then was even certified as like a facilitator for the working genius. Here's what I found. It's not perfect. It may not have some scientific backing that some other things do. However, now 1 million people or more have taken it. You can begin to see trends in the different genius kind of pairings. I love what you did in terms of saying, hey, I'm a board member, I'm a friend working with Scott as a CEO president. How are we going to work best together? We recently hired someone on our team who's going to work closely with me as an executive assistant, did the same thing with Chat GPT, put her strength finders, her Enneagram, and her working genius in there. And then we looked through it. Strangely enough, while we're at a coffee shop working through this, Pat Lencioni walks by.
Really?
He's just relocated his offices to Franklin, where I live. And it was kind of a funny occurrence. I didn't recognize him until he had just walked past. So, Pat, if you're listening, I'll see you at Onyx and Alabaster sometime. But it's a great way to understand yourself, your tendencies. There's a great podcast that can help me kind of understand myself and others. But here's where it got really fun. Taking it together as a team, and then there's a step that we take in the Working Genius where we do a team map. And now I can see my entire leadership team, or our team is small enough that I can see all of our team and where we do receive energy, where we don't. I can see how, as a leader of that team, where might be some blind spots for me, some things that are going to be frustrating about me for them that I need to be emotionally aware of, their tendencies. So an example, we're about to launch our new vision, mission, direction, strategic plan. And a lot of my team have a profile that's not mine. And so I called a friend who's well-studied in the Working Genius and said, if this genius profile is going to receive new vision, new mission, can you help me understand what the top 3 questions they need answered are so that I can serve them well? And so that's one of the fun things about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I know at the Coca-Cola Company, when I was in part of engagement teams or leading those, trying to shift the culture and renew things and make it a great place to work, which we were successful at a couple times. But the Herman brain dominance, if you're familiar with that, was one of the tools that the Coca-Cola Company used and had sanctioned. And so if you can imagine 100 people taking that and then having somebody facilitate and you say, here's how your team works, your sum teams, your personalities, all that, the way you think, your preferences, it made a difference. Now, they took it a step too far in my mind. They asked us to post our profile on our doors in our offices at work. I was like, oh, come on, man, that's too much. You walk up and say, okay, now I got to realize that this person is a dominant red. That means they're a people person. Now I got to ask them about their kids, or, get the personal conversation, the empathy, the EQ stuff. Or if they're analytical, then gosh, we don't talk about any of that stuff. We go right to the spreadsheet. So I think those things are good, though. I think it's important to 2 things. They help with awareness, self-awareness. And then really helping you tap into what you said early on was about that, finding that passion, that thing that you love about what you're doing, and help you do that. But it helps you understand other people, right? And not to manipulate them, but if I'm in a sales role, I can sit across from my buyer. Not that I say, okay, take the test for me. I need to know. You don't do that, but you can start to see those patterns, those trends, and then you can adapt your communication style and approach. And it makes a big, big difference to everybody because we're all people, right? We're all knit differently. And if we can understand that, that makes a big difference. Hey, as we wrap up, thank you for that, by the way. Next time you see Pat in the coffee store, tell him I said hello. He has no idea who I am, but that's okay. We appreciate it. That's okay. He will, though, someday, I'm sure.
Someday.
Hey, Scott, what's looking over the next year, what's the biggest challenge for you for CLC? What's going to be the hardest lift for you?
For the last year, it's been kind of, let's create a page that we can all kind of be on together. So it's create the page. Now let's get everybody onto the page, and then it start moving out with that page in mind. And so we're kind of a third of the way through that journey. Hopefully in the next month, we'll be able to say, okay, this is the page. Now let's begin to move onto it. And then by the end of 25, we really would like to start seeing that page lived out in all of our places with all of our team. But each of those is a different function, ideating and getting information to form it.
Yeah.
Then clearly communicating it, and then creating systems that reinforce it. So each of those is a different function. Some of those I play well. Some of them I'm blessed to have a good team.
Yeah, it comes to a point where once you get all that on the page and people buy in, you have to execute, right? And that's the hard part, is bringing, but that's the hard work of leadership, is bringing a vision to life, making it reality. And that's going to be your role, and I'll be by your side as we do that, certainly. So that's great. Tell me about, real quick question, because I know we've chatted a little bit about this, but like 5 years down the road, and what I love about you is your imagination, because you've written these scripts, right? You've sat down and you're thinking, okay, looking out in the future, what would that look like? And I'm used to these little short sentences that people could write, but you've written some full-length, visionary stories, scripts, right? Tell me about that real quick, because I think that's important. I haven't seen this very often. You may have picked it up somewhere, but I think you've done a really good job about how do you paint that picture.
Got a great friend, Michael Hyatt. Michael's over the Full Focus companies. And that's one of the things I've learned from him is a vision script. We can say we have this great vision, but we haven't, we might have like an abstract idea, but that idea is accompanied by a staffing plan, funding, events, or products. And so a fully formed vision script would cover much more than just, 5 years from now, we look like this, but it also has all the building blocks that help make this possible. And when I look at what we're doing in CLC in terms of men, help equipping them to follow Christ, live with purpose, lead with impact, we've got opportunities for growth in terms of new markets, new material, a new understanding of we do a lot of our work in groups, and we'll continue to do that. But groups is not the only place and the only way that people are developed and discipleship happens. And if our end goal is not just to form a bunch of men's groups, but within that to also have a process by which we're really developing a certain kind of man, a man who is not just trying on faith or a way of life, but is really, like in Colossians 2, he's rooted and he's strengthened and he's established and he's overflowing. That kind of man changes a city. And we've seen it time and time again. You're that kind of man. I want to be that kind of man. And so over the next 5 years, we're going to develop processes that really help us reinforce that that's what we're after.
Yeah, it was so good. I got this. I'm just going to real quick. It's interesting. I got this text from a guy, Oz. You know who Oz Hillman is?
No, okay, I love his name.
Oz is a author, a famous author, and he wrote this thing called The Gospel of the Kingdom. And let me read this to you because I think it plays out pretty well. It says, God is doing unique work on the earth today. There are some seasons in which the Holy Spirit speaks things to the church. During one decade, it might be a focus on evangelism. During another, it might be a greater awareness of the Holy Spirit. During yet another, it might be a focus on problems in cities. Today, God is speaking very clearly to the church about societal transformation. 15 years ago, the idea of a community being totally transformed through the gospel of Jesus Christ was a foreign concept. However, according to George Otis Jr., director of the Sentinel Group, there are over 500 communities that are in some form of quantifiable transformation process today. The defining characteristic of a community that is being transformed is the societal economic traits are being positively impacted or affected. The crime rate goes down, the economy is improved, and the number of Christians in the city increases, prayer increases, and the city leaders become Christians. It's the manifestation of Deuteronomy 28:13. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. He goes on to say this. I want to finish this up. I think this is great. I just got this today, and it just really impacted the way I was thinking about things. In order to go beyond the gospel of salvation to the gospel of the kingdom, we must exercise a different level of faith for our communities. Jesus talked about the kingdom of God more than 70 times in the New Testament, much more than he mentioned salvation. Get that? While salvation is part of bringing the kingdom of God on earth, it includes so much more. He concludes with this great question. When the gospel of the kingdom comes into a life and a community, everything else in its wake is transformed. How might God want you to be the catalyst to bring the entire gospel of the kingdom into the lives and the communities you are called to influence? Wow. I think that's so important because that's why I went from the beginning of this. Discipleship's important because it leads to a relationship. And in that relationship, the Lord will work in you and through you to influence the world around you.
Sure.
And I think we're at a tipping point now where there's a movement. And I would encourage people, if you have not checked out, number one, discipleship, figure that one out. But if you haven't checked out CLC, I highly encourage you to go to the website. clchq.org, I believe is what it is, and see about what we're doing. Come join the movement. It's not just a program. It's not a set of books that you read. It's not meeting on a Friday morning just to talk about football scores. It's real life conversations. I took it. I've been through it. And it's kind of like when I was a Sigma Chi fraternity. They say once a Sig, always a Sig. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like once you've gone through CLC, you're always part of CLC. Yep. True on that. So I think we'll end our conversation there today, Scott. I think this has been really good. Are there any questions you have for me? I'm going to turn it to you. When you came in today, mm-hmm. was there something you were thinking, I want to ask Press this, or I don't have anything on my mind, I'm more worried about what I was going to say? No, I'm just kidding. Is there anything that you would be, that I can maybe, we could talk about real quick?
I'd like to know where you get that jacket.
This jacket, yes.
And then
I've worn it 12 times on these podcast episodes. So
you're a board member of CLC. You may serve on other boards. Mm-hmm. What do you think makes a good board and president relationship?
Yeah, great conversation and good question. And I think I've shared a little bit with you on this before. Based on my experience, family business with Numerica, and my dad and my brother and I all trying to figure that out over a number of years, I've come to realize that the role of a board is to set governance, guidance, help with the mission, the vision, those types of things, but it's not to get our hands dirty in the operational and executional things. And so there's a boundary that we do there. Your challenge is that you're going to have, I guess how many people do we have on the board right now? Is it 10?
11.
11 people on the board. Is how do you take feedback from everybody, process that? Gospel's not spoken every time, right? It's not the absolute truth. Yeah, and so you have to process all that. So if I talk to you about something, I recognize that I'm not right, but I have a point of view to share with you. And the other thing I told you is my expectation of a good, positive board relationship with the president is that you're always forthright, not playing politics, and let's do this together. Let's keep the main thing, right? And you read a book that I haven't gotten yet, but I will, but it's called The Mission Always Wins.
Always wins.
And Scott, I want you to know that I haven't read it yet, but I've used that title in coaching sessions with people that are struggling with that. And I say, look, if you're having struggles with all the crap down below, let's point back up to the mission, bring it up, and let's let that win and say, is this impacting this? And if it is, and if it's not pushing it towards us, then we need to let it go. But if it's for us and moving it forward, let's do that. Does that answer your question at all?
Absolutely. And that relationship, aligning around a mission together, is both my joy and partner with a board member who's saying, yeah, and I'm aligning to that as well. That's something God uses to do some really beautiful things. So our board is a strength of CLC, and one of the things that I look forward to seeing God through more and more and more.
Good. Awesome. All right. Hey, Scott, thank you for today. Thanks for being on today. Again, if you want to learn more about CLC, had a chance to listen all the way to into this podcast, make sure you go to clchq.org and check out the organization. And it may provide to you a need that you have and help you draw closer to the Lord and a group of men on that, a small group that'll walk alongside you. It's an incredible experience. Hey, and if you've liked what you've heard today, hopefully you'll share it with somebody else. You'll pass it along. You'll subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, and to the podcast here. And also you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Great conversation today, Scott. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Take care and talk soon.